joined early, welcome. Great to have you. I'm Bill Benjamin. We're going to start in a few minutes. In the meantime, why don't you let us know in the chat where you are calling in from, or I used to say dialing in from, which so dates me, but where you are logging in from. I am coming in from Chicago, west suburbs, for anyone in the Chicago area. I see a Chad Holmesy. I'm guessing there's a relation there. Maybe you're in Kansas City, I'm guessing. All right, we got Topeka, we got Manhattan, Kansas, not Manhattan, New York. Overland Park, yeah, okay, Julie, that's your husband. By the way, you would not be shocked at how many husbands get sent to our emotional intelligence training.
I wouldn't have any clue about that.
Smart, smart, no comment. Julie, I think we've got a few more folks from your team, so you want to wait another minute or two. I think Dia and a few others were planning to join. Should we wait?
Here, I'm just gonna come on camera. Yes, let's see who did we have. We might give it a minute or two more. Hi, Susan. Hi, Chad. And then, hi, Susan. What time is it?
I'll take about one after.
Okay. I mean, I can start reading the intro. Would you like to do that?
Awesome. Yeah, I always like to honor the people that show up in time. So yeah,
That's right, my
good.
on-time people. Well, I'm Julie Holmesy, and Brittany and I are excited to welcome everyone today for a very special webinar with our good friends, Bill and JP. We've known them for years and years and years, and they just do such a fabulous job. And we'd had lunch with Bill a while ago, and he offered to do this, and we were like, oh, yes, please. Thank you. Thank you. So it's a great opportunity. Bill Benjamin is the partner at the Institute for Health and Human Potential, IHHP, and has advanced degrees in mathematics and computer science. Combined with his 30 years of real-world business experience, Bill brings a science-based approach to the topics of leadership, emotional intelligence, and the last 8%. JP. JP Pawliw, founder of IHHP and the author of the New York Times best-selling book, Performing Under Pressure, spends his time consulting with and speaking to organizations on the topics of culture, high performance, emotional intelligence, and the last 8%. His research on the last 8% has just been published in the Harvard Business Review. IHHP's clients include Goldman Sachs and Mercedes, as well as Navy SEALs, Olympic athletes, the NBA, and NFL teams. Thank you guys for joining us.
Awesome. Thanks, Julie.
Yeah.
Absolutely our pleasure. And we go back, when I think of it, Julie and Brittany, gosh, like maybe 25 years. So it's
It's
just awesome to be back. It's about that long, wouldn't it be?
I think it's so. We did all those showcases together way
Yeah.
back when.
Yeah, that's right. Gosh, great to be here. Unfortunately, I don't work with the Kansas City Chiefs.
Oh.
It's a different team in the NFL, which, by the way, I really love the Chiefs and I love their whole culture and their environment. But it's so great to be here with everyone today. And we're going to make this interactive. Bill and I are going to trade back and forth, but it's just like wonderful to be here. I want to start with a question. And I recognize not everyone on the call today is a formal leader, but I want to start with a question. Why would anyone want to be led by you? Seriously, think about that. Think about the highest performer you have on your team, that person who gets the strategy. Clients love them. People on their team would go through a wall for them. This is the person you'd most hate to lose. Okay, so got that person in your mind. Why would that person choose to sacrifice their time, their talent, their careers, their time away from family for you? To me, that's the kind of anchor question that I think is worth asking every day because there is so much change. There is so much disruption. That's not going away. You know, when we work with athletes, I've been to 7 Olympic Games. We work with an athlete and they get an anchor question. So, kind of first hack. So, today we're going to talk both science of human behavior. We're going to challenge you to become a student of human behavior, but we're also going to give you some tools, some hacks. Here's the first one. Choose an anchor question. What is an anchor question? So, with an athlete, we work on this question so that when it feels like the sky is falling, the earth underneath them is moving, they feel a bit out of control. You pull that anchor question out of your back pocket and it instantly brings perspective. It kind of says, it's like a proxy question. It's like, this is what matters. And I think, why would anyone want to be led by you is a great proxy question. There's a few other potential questions in this hour that we'll spend with you, but that's a great hack. So when you're feeling it, you can pull it out and go, okay, this is what matters. So fantastic to be here. And we're going to share some slides and dig right into it. So you wake up in the morning and you want to do well, right? You want to get traction. You want to have a great relationship with all the different people in your life, but something gets in the way. I want to tell you a story from our research. And by the way, this is not some trite motivational speech we're going to give today. We want to give you really good data, but accessible so you can take action on it. So let me tell you the story. About 7 or 8 years ago, I'm working with a CEO at a Fortune 100 company in New York. And he had just won the position. The previous CEO was removed. The person he competed with was another internal candidate, somebody he was on the senior leadership team previously. And they'd worked so well together when they're in this kind of orientation of a relationship. When they moved to that, where, you know, there was a boss and a direct report, they struggled. Now, listen, you might know this, but when an internal candidate at a big job like that doesn't get the position, generally they leave. This person decided to stay because, for a whole bunch of reasons, and the new CEO wanted them to stay, but they just were struggling. They brought me in to coach them. I coached them to have a conversation. You know, in individual coaching sessions, I coached them to have a conversation. They had the conversation. They came back to the individual coaching sessions. I asked each of them, how'd it go? They said, bad. And you're a really poor coach. Well, they didn't say that last part, but I'm sure they were thinking that. The only thing they could agree on is that they would like me to mediate a final conversation. It would either be an exit conversation, which would be valuable in its own way, or it's a Hail Mary pass, a last chance. So, you know, 3 of us in a room for 2.5 hours. It finished. I had my individual coaching sessions with each of them, and I asked them each, again, independently, how'd it go? And they said, so much better. We think this can work. I'm like, great. But then I asked 2 questions that set off our research agenda for really till today, that culminated in the article Julie mentioned in the Harvard Business Review 2 weeks ago, by the way, just released. I asked 2 questions. Did you say everything you wanted to say to the other person? And they both answered immediately, yes, absolutely. Now, remember, I'm coaching them. I know all the issues. I'm in the room with them. They were not saying everything that they wanted to say. So I pushed them. I said, really, you said everything you wanted to say. And then they both, again, independently, but they both relented. They said, okay, maybe not. That was the first question. Second question, because we try to quantify as much as we can. What percentage did you leave out that you felt like you really wanted to say? You know, it's not you're saying everything that's on your mind, but that you really felt was important to say, but you didn't. And they both said somewhere between 5 and 10%. And that was like a big aha for our research group. We're like, there's something here. And so we did a study of 34,000 people. And we found that there's this gap, right, between what we really want to say and what we actually say. And it's really about interpersonal risk taking. That's what the article's about. That's what we're going to talk to you today about. And what we know is that, and it could be a decision, it could be a conversation. Let's say Julie and I are having this conversation. and I get to the kind of 75, 80, 90, 92% of what I want to say. But when I get to that hardest part of the conversation, the part that has consequences for her, she starts to get a bit, understandably, you know, agitated, emotional maybe. And this is what we all miss. I get infected by her emotion. And as opposed to continuing and having that hardest part of the conversation, I back off. Now, here's a problem. Julie's pretty smart, but she can't read my mind. Your people cannot read your mind. They don't know you didn't have the full conversation. A month later, Julie and I are in a meeting, and she's doing what I thought we talked about. We didn't talk about it, but I thought we did. She's looking at me going, "Why are you being so passive aggressive, JP? I thought things are on track." The problem is we never had the last 8% conversation. That was a percentage that we found. I missed that hardest part of the conversation. And of course, it's not just conversations, it's also decisions. And this gets in the way. And that's what we're going to talk about. Not all moments are created equal. Some have an outsized influence on all the things you care about, your results, your reputation, the culture on your team. And so just to really clarify, what is the last 8%? Now, I'm going to give you an example from the conversation end, but it's also decision making, right? But there's what you want to say, right? That honest, important feedback, the truth about how you really feel. And then there's what you actually say, more vague, sugar coated. And it's really avoidance. And we found that gap between what we really want to say and what we actually say is 7.56%. And again, I want to make sure you know this is really about interpersonal risk taking, right? You're in a meeting. Do you name an inconvenient truth? Do you speak up when you have an idea that you think could help? There's a gap between when we feel we should, based on the situation, and then what we actually do. And that gap is the last 8%. Of course, we rounded it up. Sounds better on a book. But that's kind of the last 8%. And that's where we really want to focus, because as you'll see, this has a huge impact on, again, all the things we care about. Go ahead, Bill.
I love that work. And when we originally did this work, it really was about difficult conversations. But as we workshopped it, people said, well, there aren't just the tough decisions, the tough conversations that I have. There's the tough decisions, the ones that keep me up at night. Not the 92% where everyone's happy and the deadlines are being met, but those tough ones where maybe you have to say no to someone and they're going to be unhappy, or you're taking a risk and it's uncertain whether you'll be okay. And by the way, this webinar is all about uncertainty and the need to take risks when things are uncertain. Or it might be a decision where someone's going to be unhappy. And I have an example of that. And this was when I worked at a computer software company and I was the vice president of sales. And we made a large sale, and there were two salespeople that had contributed to it because it was multiple product. It was a very complex sale. And both of them felt they should get 100% of the commission. Now, I knew that it probably shouldn't be 100%. It should probably actually be split 50-50. But I knew both of these salespeople were very aggressive, that they would be very upset at me. And I didn't want to deal with that. I remember being up at night worrying about the impact of telling them they weren't going to get their full commission. So rather than making the right decision, I avoided it. I went to my boss, the president, and said, you know what? These salespeople both worked really hard on this. Let's give them both 100%. Now, the president wasn't as close to that sale. He didn't really know. He trusted me, and we did. And it cost the company about $30,000. That was 25 years ago. So I remember this, that I made a decision that was out of alignment with what I knew was the right thing because I just wanted to avoid dealing with people who wouldn't be happy with me. And JP talks, so I still have some regret 25 years later, and JP talks about this idea of stepping into a last 8% moment, pushing past the anxiety and the discomfort, in this case, the anxiety and discomfort of somebody being mad at me, in order to avoid long-term regret. Because I can tell you right now, I wouldn't even be thinking about that decision 25 years later if I'd just done the right thing. So it isn't just the last 8% conversations, there's also decisions. So JB, if you want to go to the next slide. So we want to talk about what is the hard stuff. And for this, we're actually going to ask Brittany from the Speakers Exchange Agency to come on and share an example of a challenging last 8% decision that she faced. So, Brittany, thank you for coming on.
Yes, thank you for having me. Thank you everyone for being here. Yes, an 8% decision actually is Julie and I starting the speaker exchange. We knew we weren't working in this industry the way we wanted to work. We knew changes needed to be made. I think Julie and I knew it for a long time, and we tried to avoid it, like you said. We're like, okay, we're not going to go there. We're going to lose friends. People are going to judge us. There's going to be lots of rumors about why we're doing this. And finally, when we had the guts to do it, we're
Hmm.
so glad we did once we made it to the other side, but it was definitely hard. And I do think we probably wish we would have done it sooner.
And let me ask you a question. Of all those things that you told yourself of why not to do it, we're going to lose friends, people are going to judge us, it's not going to work out. How many of those things actually happened?
Everything that happened was temporary, right? So there was a little uncomfortableness for a little bit, but it all ended up just kind of working itself out in the end.
Right. I mean, I'm guessing, did you actually lose friends? I mean, probably
No,
not.
no, in the end
No.
we didn't. Like, we didn't end up
Right, exactly. And so that's one thing to be aware of as you're in a last 8% moment or considering a decision is the degree to which we amplify the negative and we assume all the worst outcomes. Our brain is wired to do that to protect us, but that keeps us from taking risks when we just sort of awfulize about all the things that could go wrong. So I do love that example. So what were some of the just before we move on, what were some of the feelings you had as you were thinking about making this decision?
Nausea, vomiting. No, just kidding. No, like a very uncomfortable feeling, right? And
Yeah.
I think it's because in our comfort zone we feel safe even though we're not happy. But it's like the unknown is so uncomfortable that, and you don't know what the outcome. And like you said, like my our brains like couldn't see the positiveness because I don't think we could envision it yet. And so yeah, it was a very like nervous feeling.
Mhm.
Like stress, lots of stress in that. So,
Absolutely. And by the way, as we're talking about this, Brittany, I would love for the folks who are here to actually share in the chat as we're talking about this idea of the last 8%. What's a last 8% moment, a decision or conversation that you faced or you have coming up that's coming to mind? Because we'd love to hear from some of you in the chat. And again, the topic of this webinar is change and uncertainty. And so I love this, just that like that feeling of literally like I want to throw up. Like it literally can feel physical to approach something where there's uncertainty. It might not work out because we all want to avoid failure. We all want to be liked. We don't want to lose friends. And so all these emotions are what keep us from taking the risks and stepping into those last 8% moments. Um, so let's see if we have any brave souls who are willing to share a last 8% moment that they face in the chat. You guys were pretty good at sharing where you're from. This one takes a little more vulnerability. So I'd love to hear someone share an example of a last 8% moment or a decision they faced. All right, no takers yet, so we'll move on. Um, so I think the next question. So for those of you that are thinking about but just not sharing in the chat about a last 8% conversation or situation you face, the next question you really want to ask yourself is what would the impact on managing change and uncertainty be if that conversation went well or the decision went well? So I mean, gosh, in Brittany's case, well, I mean, Speakers Exchange Agency has been a going concern for what, 18 years now? Brittany, is that right, 18 years?
we're going on 14.
Sorry, 14 years. I mean,
Don't
what an
age
amazing,
us.
what an amazing success. And by the way, in the case of my decision, the one that I avoided, I would have saved the company money. And I was actually, I had a profit bonus, so I would have saved myself money. But honestly, that didn't really matter. That's 24 years ago, and that's small amounts of money. It's actually the regret that I have felt and the shame almost ever since of not doing what was right. And so if I'd made the right decision and and by the way, I don't know if those salespeople would have been upset as I thought they were going to be. Maybe they would have recognized, well, yeah, the other guy had a contribution, and maybe so I don't even know what would have happened. It may not even have gone as badly as I thought it would. Okay, so in a last 8% moment, and by the way, there's two types of last 8% moments. There's the expected ones where a decision you make might upset someone, or there's a chance that what you're going to say no, or you're going to give somebody some critical feedback that could impact them. The expected. Then there's the unexpected. You're going about your day, everything's going great, and all of a sudden you get an email or somebody shifts a project deadline or a leader changes something and you're very frustrated. So there's the expected and the unexpected, and we all have a predictable default behavior. In our research, 68% of you and us are more likely to avoid, to step back, what we've described, not make the right decision, not step in and say that last 8%. But what about the other 32%? Well, I fall into this category sometimes. I'm in that difficult conversation. The other person starts reacting. Rather than stepping back, I step in, but I come on too strong, and now I'm making a mess. So we talk about people either being avoiders or make a messers. Now, we're more complex beings than a simple binary choice like that. There are certain situations where you might be a lot more likely to avoid, like a senior person is challenging you. Whereas, I don't know about all of you, but when my teenage daughters are yelling at me, I'm a bit more likely to yell back, which, by the way, all I'm doing in that moment is teaching them to yell when they're frustrated. So it can be situational, but in general, you all have a predictable default behavior of avoiding or making a mess. So I'm going to try again with the chat. This one's a little easier. So I'd love for you to share, generally, do you find yourself generally you're more of an avoider or make a messer? JP, what would you say? But while folks are typing that in the chat, what would you class yourself as an avoider or make a messer?
Well, I mean, I'm a recovering avoider for sure.
Hmm.
And, as you're filling in the chat and I see people are doing that, which is great. Part of what we want to do is we really want to challenge you, to be that student of human behavior, starting with yourself. And the thing that helped me the most was having a coach, or a therapist when my life wasn't going so well, but having someone who could be like no skin in the game, who could be that reality test. And I came to realize, yeah, why do I avoid? And I'm more of an avoider. It's because I want to be liked. I mean, great, except is that going to help the organization? Is that going to help the team I'm working with? Probably not. And so, I think, where I might be more of an avoider, as Bill mentioned, and you might have missed that, but he's a little bit more of a make a messer. And it really goes 2/3 to 1/3. I'm just looking right now in the chat. I'm seeing actually almost 50-50. Now, we don't have a
Yeah, we've
huge
got
sample.
more make a messer crowd here.
I know it's like
Yeah.
this is maybe the first time. Now it's a small sample, so but nonetheless, fascinating.
The other thing I had someone say, JP, is I avoid, then I blow up and make a mess.
Of course, I'm familiar with that pattern. So what's at stake, right? If these last 8% moments count so much, what's at stake? Well, we know that number one are results. So what do I mean by that? Well, do you know that 70% of people don't speak up on your team right now? This is global population surveyed. 70% don't speak up when they see something wrong or they have an idea that they think could help. Think about how that's going to impact your results. It has a huge impact. If you're not getting all the information to make a decision, that's not going to help you outperform the competition. By the way, your competition is facing their own last 8% because it's a universal challenge everyone faces. You actually don't need to be perfect in the last 8%. You just need to be a few percent better than your competitors for it to be a competitive advantage, right? Just think about naming inconvenient truths. If people can really step in on your team and name that truth and do it skillfully, not make a mess, not avoid, that's really it, right? There's a middle way there. How much better would you get in terms of results? And so, number one, what's at stake is results. Number two, your reputation. You care, I care, and I feel like both Brittany and Bill mentioned this in their stories, and I certainly did. We care about what people think of us. That's a big driver of our behavior more than we even realize. Get this, 65% of people would forgo a pay raise to see their manager fired. What does that speak to? That speaks to the pain that people feel working for a manager. So let's turn it a little bit. If you're a manager, if you lead others, this is a universal study that was global population. This is how people are feeling. So it matters how you step in those moments, because that's what's going to drive your reputation. What we know is when you're under pressure, in the last 8% moment, you've got more cortisol in your brain. Cortisol is a stress hormone. And one of the things that cortisol does is that it sears in memory. You'll never forget where you were during 9/11 when you saw those images, or when your team didn't, kick that field goal or did kick that field goal. And so your people, whether you're a leader or not, the people you work with don't really pay attention until the pressure rises. And then they really pay attention, and this becomes your reputation. How you show up, the decisions you make. Do you listen? Do you make a mess? Do you avoid? That's what gets seared into their brain. That becomes your reputation, which, by the way, in most organizations do a horrible job at deciding who should get that next promotion. It's just true. It's hard, but most do it really poorly. So what happens is that a manager uses what's most salient in their mind, which is what they remember from last 8%, which in some ways isn't bad, except they don't have the full picture of your performance. So it behooves you to think, how can I be better in these hard moments? Because that becomes your reputation. Finally, and this is like not insignificant, Julie mentioned, our work is with organizations who really aspire to be high performing. And so this final piece is really important. Most people misunderstand culture. They really do. They think it's driven by the values on the wall. They think it exists across an organization. Both are myths that are incorrect. Culture exists more on a team. That's a fundamental unit where culture exists, not across an organization, number one. Number two, it doesn't get driven by the values on the wall. In one study we did, 64% of people couldn't even name the values in their organization. So that's not driving their behavior. So what drives culture? What you do in the last 8% moments, because of the same cortisol effect, right? I could say, let's say, again, I talked about Julie and I having a conversation. Let's say we worked in the same organization. And we could have the value that's integrity really matters. But she comes to me because our organization potentially is going to be out of integrity around something that matters. What I do in that moment is what gets seared into her brain that becomes the culture on our team. Culture, way to think of culture is it's the stories of how we do things around here. So the stories get seared in the last 8% moments, not that we say it's integrity. It's, do I actually live with integrity? Because that's what Julie and everyone will remember. Those are the behaviors that get rewarded, reinforced. And by the way, this is a good thing because it means when things are hard, that's your biggest opportunity to transform the culture on your team. I hope you see that, right? In fact, the fact that it exists more on the team level means you can equip your people leaders to own the culture on their team. And if you do that across the organization, you can change your culture at speed and at scale. We have data to prove it. In fact, I'm going to brag just for a minute. We just heard last week that one of the big transformations that we did with a large automotive organization, McKinsey just called the most effective transformation in 50 years of their experience of consulting with organizations. We're like over the moon about this. We really are. And I feel like that's enough bragging for now. But the real test of culture then is not what's on the wall. It's what do you do in difficult situations? And you can learn this. That's the point. Learn this. So Bill, why don't you step in from here? Because I'm getting too excited by this content.
Yeah, I mean, and you taught me this. Is from the research we know that high performance requires risk, and again in change and uncertainty that's even harder because if people aren't taking risks, then they aren't challenging the status quo. They aren't giving performance feedback. They aren't saying no and they're taking on too many projects and getting overwhelmed. So you need people to be able to step into these last 8% moments in order to get high performance. The challenge is the fundamental conflict, as JP named it, is that we default to protection, not risk. when faced with change, uncertainty, or any kind of last 8% moment. Our brain is wired, and our emotional intelligence work is all around that, right? What's actually happening in your brain? That's how I got attracted to this work. I used to be an IHHP client, and this work has made such a big difference for me around managing emotions. Because what you want is you want to be able to push into those last 8% moments, overcome that need to protect and not take a risk, yet do it skillfully so that you don't make a mess, right? And it's that middle ground of stepping in but being skillful. And that's really what we're teaching and what's required in times of change and uncertainty. JP, do you want to add anything to that?
I mean, no, except that I just like it's going on for every team. This is not
Yeah.
even about organizations. This is the neuroscience of group behavior, right? You could be in a rec softball league. You could be in a church group. You could be at a group, an alumni group of your university. And some even follow Oklahoma on this group today, which is crazy. But anyway, that aside, but you could be in a family. It doesn't matter. In order for a family, for any group to be successful, we know, based on very good data, you need to take a risk, an interpersonal risk. But at the same time, your brain, everyone's brain is
Mhm.
protecting. It defaults to protection, not risk. And so it's a conflict. And unless you can help people get over that, you won't get them to take the kind of risks you need to be high performing. So let me dig into, I'm going to do the first two, Bill, and then why don't you do the whole map? So,
Cool.
what we did is, and this is a great little story, but, I coach coaches in the NHL, the NBA, the NFL now. And we noticed at the same time that that story of the leaders I was telling you about in New York 7 or 8 years ago, as we're coaching these teams, coaching coaches of these teams, we're noticing that the highest performing teams have coaches who operate a little differently. And there were two traits. And what's great is that it fit with the data from our 34,000 persons, actually the 72,000 person study, which is what this map you're going to see here is all about, is that they displayed both high connection. So people on these teams, athletes, felt that trust, belonging, and psychological safety, but they also felt this norm that we do hard things on this team. And what's amazing is that those athletes literally, and I mean the word literally, felt loved by their coach. So they had such trust and high care that they felt from the coach that they could endure the really hard conversations, the tough feedback, the high expectations, and the two together are really powerful. So, Bill, you take it from here.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that Doc Rivers, the NBA winning coach, once said to you, if my players know they love me, that I love them, then when I make a mistake, when I make a bad decision, I get grace. I make a substitution I shouldn't have made. I didn't call timeout when I should have. And so that high connection is incredibly important. Okay, so we took these two concepts, the courage and the connection, the two pillars, and we created a culture map. And on the left axis is courage, and on the bottom axis is connection. So now what we're going to talk about isn't so much kind of individual development, it's actually culture, it's environment, it's team dynamics. And if you think of a culture that's on the bottom right, that's where high connection but low courage. That's a family. That's a nice culture, but people are unwilling to do hard things. They don't step into the last 8% moments. They tend to avoid. There's the lower standards of performance. Um, Accountability it's inconsistent. Sometimes there is and sometimes there isn't. It slows decision making down. Oh my gosh. And there's nothing wrong with consensus decision making, but when you have to get everybody involved and everybody has to be happy and everybody has to agree, it slows decision making down significantly. In fact, William Wrigley Jr. said, when two people in business always agree, one of them is unnecessary. So you want people challenging each other. You just can't make everyone happy. And you don't want to upset others. People don't step into the tough conversations because they don't want to upset others and they want to be liked. Now, there's lots of positive things about a family culture. There is that high trust, there is that belong, there is that risk taking, but it's not enough. JP has said, you're not actually a family. You don't fire your lowest performing kid. You may want to some days, but you don't actually. Okay, then on the upper left, high courage, low connection is a transactional culture where results matter over relationships, especially short-term results. It's more of a make a mess environment. When something goes wrong, people are blaming. There is courage, people are speaking up, but it's unskillful. And so there's these kind of frayed relationships. Um, as I said, it's kind of a blame make a mess environment. It's a bad behaviors are tolerated, and I used to make that mistake as a sales leader. I had a salesperson who got results but left bodies in their wake, and what I didn't realize is even though they were getting results, one toxic person can derail the performance of a team by 30 to 40%. And it's a high anxiety, high burnout culture. It can achieve results over the short term. It's not sustainable over the long term. Now, the bottom left, we don't see this as much these days. The fear-based culture. I mean, there are a few industries that are, still a little behind in this. I'm not going to name any oil and gas that tend to be more authoritarian, more command and control. Um, it's inconsistent, and unpredictable, right? Because it's just uncontrolled, unmanaged behavior. Um, and so there's not a lot of trust. People don't feel they belong to something. They don't feel valued. People are definitely defaulting to protection. It's the walking on eggshells. I've actually worked in this environment, and it's really, really tough. It's not a great environment to work in, and people don't want to speak up because they're going to get hammered. All right, the aspiration, the goal. I think what we're doing, yeah. So, JP, do we talk about okay, we talk about the percentages here. We changed this up a little bit. Okay, so in our research, or JP, why don't you take this?
Sure, sure.
You changed up the slides on me here, so I'm gonna let you take
Yeah, yeah.
this.
I thought people would be interested to know where most groups are. And in our study of 72,000 people, again, that, we'll send you the link to the Harvard Business Review article where this is published. But we found the biggest clusters in the bottom right. And it's interesting, isn't it? Right? That family culture. And I think a big reason is because as a human being, we have a desire. It's bigger than a desire, an instinct to connect. And that's why I think we get pulled down and we want to connect. And especially in a small organization like Bill and my organization, it's a small organization relative, compared to IBM or Goldman Sachs or whoever we work with. And so even more so, it's easy to kind of fall into the family. But the truth is you're not going to actually get the performance you want if you're not actually going to name, the inconvenient truth, the hard truth of what's going on. And so I just want you to think right now. And in fact, I think, is Julie going to do that, Bill? Come on.
Brittany,
And
Brittany's gonna
Brittany
share
is.
again.
Sorry, Brittany, I'd love for you to come on right now and just think about these three and think about in the past. So this is not her current team, but in the past, um, can you think of a team that, was somewhere in one of these three quadrants?
Yeah, I actually worked for a company where it was very transactional, and it was actually more transactional felt from management down to the sales team. So I was the salesperson, and my manager did not see the relationship he had with his salespeople. It was all about the money all the time.
Interesting. And what impact did that have on you?
I mean, it's still, I think I left shortly after, right? So you're busting your tail, working hard. I remember asking him, please, will you buy this client some concert tickets? We work in radio. I know this is I'm growing them. And he pulled me in his office and was like, you can buy them yourself. And there was, I still remember that. And it was what,
Yeah.
14, 15 years ago. And I remember being like, this place is not for me. If he's not going to
Yeah.
support me and see the bigger picture when I'm here busting my butt and trust me, I felt there's
Yeah.
no trust. It was back all to the bottom line, all to the money all the time. So
Wow. And what impact did that have on other people staying? Because clearly you left. Did
yeah,
did was there a bit of a revolving door?
yeah.
Yeah.
People, didn't stay a long time. Kind of, he was known as a very tyrant type boss. So you get burned out. Like I think
Yeah.
you try and stick around, but eventually everyone kind of got burned out and got poached to go somewhere else, and the loyalty was never there as an employee.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because it starts to dawn on you, like if I'm going to lead a team, start an organization, what kind of culture do I want in my organization? right? Because when we think of the speaking business, like what differentiates one bureau from another? Well, I mean, I would say, relationship, and there's a bunch of things that you guys know better than I. But I think a big part is will your team constantly or consistently take risks to try new things, to differentiate from the others? Because if we're doing the same thing that everyone else is doing, in a sense, we're average. And, this really brings up this upper right hand quadrant where I'll segue next is you can build a culture that is not part of this 67%. And we call that a last 8% culture. And just let me share one other piece first. This is just some other new research that fits with what we're talking about. Majority of teams right now, we know, are not as effective, according to this new Harvard research, move too slow and are not innovative. And here's the kicker. Most managers have no clue why. They use guesswork and gut feel. So this map we created was to help you understand your team, make the invisible visible, the intangible more tangible, to take charge of the culture on your team. And so, that's how the study and then the research and then the cluster analysis, and it found that you can create on your team a culture where there is these two key pillars: high accountability and high care. Those are kind of the behaviors that fit the high courage, high connection, just to make sense for you. And this is what makes people feel, oh, I am trusted. And because I feel that high trust, I will take that risk. I will go out on a limb and name that inconvenient truth because I know my manager has my back. And that's how you get the experimentation, where you get that differentiation for you as an organization, right? And this is what drives, it's a feedback rich environment, it's results in relationships, but it's this piece. The world is moving super fast. You need your people to take experiments. What's an experiment? Like a true experiment means that some percentage of time, let's call it 50%, some percentage of time, the experiment doesn't work out, or else it's not a true experiment, right? Or else you're just reproducing the same things that, your organization and others have done for years, and you won't get differentiation. So I love your story, Brittany. And what's awesome about what the two of you are doing is saying, hey, we're going to run our own shop, and we're going to create the kind of culture we want to create. And even in our organization, we're constantly looking at this map and thinking, what's working, what's not working? Because I can tell you, I challenged our team. We have a president who runs things now, but before that president, I was the president, and I challenged our team because I felt like we were in the family quadrant, and I said, we need more accountability. And one of our VPs said, JP, I appreciate your intention. I think we need a system of accountability. And that was just like, put me back on my heels. And by the way, I loved it, because what did that say? That said that she's not afraid to speak up, but it also helped us then form a better system so we have both high care and high accountability. And I mean, honestly, that's where we are now. And pretty darn excited by that. Thank you so much, Brittany. Now listen, if you want to think of, your team and where is it at, you can go here. It's a tool. Go to this QR code and literally download we'll give you the map. By the way, have them read the HBR article. You can get a free copy. Like, I think they allow 5 free articles a month if you're not a subscriber. But take a picture, and then get the map, put it in front of your team and ask them, hey, where are we on this map? And just think about it though. If you're not in the upper right-hand quadrant, people might feel some trepidation, right? To take that risk to really say, well, I think we're in the upper left or the bottom right. So you got to actually go to your way to make it safe for them to share. And so these are the questions that you can ask them. And I find it really powerful. Bill, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, let me my video come back on. Do you want to go back to the culture map?
Sure.
One of the things that we often talk to clients about, because you can imagine a lot, as the data says, a lot of our clients are in the family quadrant. And we talk about the idea that connection comes before courage. So you really do need that sense of trust, that sense of, because if you think about, a feedback-rich environment, and when we talk about a feedback-rich environment, it isn't just the manager giving feedback to employees. It's the team giving feedback to each other because there's an agreed to kind of culture of giving each other feedback, challenging the status quo. And for those of you that are leaders, it's great when the team are doing it because then you don't have to. Um, but people are much more open to receiving feedback, to having somebody challenge them if they feel connected. And so think about you're receiving feedback from somebody who you question their motivations. You don't know if they really respect you versus somebody you admire that you would go to the wall for, an exceptional leader. You're going to receive that feedback completely differently. So that combination, and it's that combination. A lot of times clients think, well, if we're in family and we add in courage and accountability, we're going to end up in transactional, or the other way around. We have a transactional culture. If we try to move to family, it's going to be all soft and squishy. And what we're saying is it's both. It's high care and high accountability, especially in last 8% moments. So that's the tie back to the original, is because we know culture is established in the last 8% moments. It's can people show up with both high care and high accountability in their last 8% moments. And I think that's the great work that we do. And that's something I'm still working on myself. It's not easy, but I think we do pretty well as an organization on that. So that's just what I wanted to share on that.
That's great, Bill. And so we're going to go to some questions. So if you have a question, you can just put it in the chat, and we're happy to answer. But I just want to speak to something. This idea of if you are actually going to um, bring this to your team and ask these questions, if they're not feeling safe to really name where your team is at, here's a bit of a hack, right? Go first. You go first. And really think about, I mean, this is hard, but think about what's your contribution to the current culture on your team. Let's say it's not going as well as you wish it was going. What I would suggest you do if I was your coach, I'd say start by saying, hey, team, here's this map. I'd love to hear where you think we are on the map, but I'm going to go first because I know you might feel a bit anxious to even talk about it. And so as I've thought about it, I think, and by the way, kind of authentically, because I'm a bit of an avoider and I don't think I was as strong and direct as I needed to be, I think we're high on care but low on accountability, and I own that. And so I'm really committed to trying to get us to the upper right hand quadrant because I think we all want that. And so that's like when I'm a little vulnerable, essentially what I'm saying is I'm taking off my armor, so can you, right? You can take that risk. And so by going first, that's a really powerful way to get other people to kind of step in and kind of name it. Because if you don't name it, then you'll just stay stuck, right? This is the thing, right? This is the thing I want you to walk away with, which is culture exists on a team. You don't have to be a huge organization to think, oh, we should work on our culture. No, it exists on your team. And if you're the person who is the team leader, the manager, the people leader, you need to think about owning the culture on your team. And so that's
JP, one,
probably
one question that I
go
often
ahead.
get in my keynotes is, okay, I recognize that, our culture is maybe it's transactional, maybe it's family, or maybe it's even in last 8%, but it's just over the line, right? In terms of, and
Yeah.
so, we'd like to add more courage and accountability or care, whichever it is. How do you do that? How do you actually change the culture on a team? Especially given the culture happens in the last 8% moments. How do you
Yeah.
change the way people behave?
Yeah. No, so it's a great question. What we know from the research is for someone to take so going back just to build the case, the most important driver of performance on a team we now know is taking interpersonal risk. There's no question about that, by the way. Okay, so then what do you need to do for people to take risks? There's two kind of pillars of that. One is, and it's about 50% of the behavior that's any behavior, but let's talk about risk. For someone to take a risk, half comes from inside of them. Their level of skills, their confidence to use their skills. That's half. But half is in the environment, right? The water that that team is swimming in. It's 50-50. And a lot of training companies only train skills.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes culture organizations only train culture. You really need both because it's an interplay. It's a kind of a cycle, a loop, you could say. And so that's the kind of really important part, the science. And then how to do that? Well, you want to give people, it just follows, skills to be better, emotional self-regulation skills to be better in those hard moments. And then you want to give them a structure to own the culture on their team, which is kind of what that map represents. And you know this, Bill, but I mean, so we work with organizations, both Bill and I speak, we do, fair amount of events a year. But the bigger part of our business is actually helping organizations build this high performing culture of high care and high accountability. And so we have a sprint approach. We don't have to get into it, but I get that question a lot too. And that's kind of the way to do it.
By the way, that was totally a setup question for you to share that we have this consulting training part of the organization in addition to the speaking. And clients really appreciate that because we've all had that experience of, and I have, of you see a speaker at an event, you're like, wow, that's great. And then 2 months later, 6 months later, has anything really changed? And so clients really appreciate that we actually have more in-depth system that we can actually help drive change after a keynote. And so that's why I wanted to mention that because there really is a value add there.
So, Brittany or Julie, any final questions before we finish up?
Yeah, we can always give people a few minutes of their day back here. Yeah.
Yeah, no, this is great. I mean, the research behind it, being able to implement it, see results, our clients are really craving change, right? They want to bring
Yes.
people in that can actually change their organization, and we're seeing that more and more. So, thank you guys for all your research and hard work that you do. If you guys have any questions about Bill or JP and would like more information, just let us know. We'd love to send more, set up a call with them so you could ask them one-on-one questions. But thank you all so much for being here, and thank you, Bill and JP, for your time. We love seeing you, and we love our relationship that we've had
Yes.
for almost 20 years.
Yeah.
We do. Thanks to the speaker. A
Bill,
virtual hug. Thanks to the Speakers Exchange
yeah.
Agency. We love you guys too.
Yeah. And just as everyone's leaving, I'll just one final note, which is this. We don't want to, or I don't want to wish you good luck. I don't really believe in luck. I believe in big luck, right? I'm Ukrainian. My family moved away from the Ukraine 100 years ago. I'm not fighting in a war. That's big luck. I had nothing to do with that. But day-to-day luck, don't know if I believe in that so much. So I don't want to wish you good luck. I want to wish you two things. Good preparation, which is what we're doing today, right? Prepare. People don't do better under pressure. They fall to their level of preparation. So prepare, prepare, prepare. So not good luck, but good preparation. Then when you meet a last 8% situation, see it for what it is, right? That opportunity to transform yourself, the team, the culture, and your results. So not good luck, but good preparation and then good courage as you step in. So again, thank you so much. Great to see everyone. Brittany and Julie, our pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you, guys.
Goodbye, everyone.
Everybody.
Have a good one. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.